That's the theme from Jeopardy, the quiz show hosted by Alex Trebek. Right now, his familiar qualities, poise, and understated humor.
For nearly 4 decades, Alex Trebek stood behind the Jeopardy podium with calm authority, guiding America's brightest contestants through the toughest trivia. To millions, he was witty, charming, and unshakably composed. But not every moment was as polished as it seemed. Behind his sharp humor and polite smile, Trebek had little patience for certain players, and when they crossed the line, he let them know it. From one contestant whose passion sparked worldwide headlines to another whose antics changed the game forever, these encounters revealed a side of Trebek few expected, and the names on his list may surprise you. The man behind the podium. Alex Trebek was more than a game show host. He was a cultural institution. For 37 seasons, he stood behind the podium of Jeopardy, shaping not only the way trivia was presented on television, but also the way millions of viewers engaged with knowledge itself. His sharp suits, calm voice, and steady presence made him a household name across generations. And yet, behind that polished exterior, the story of Trebek's personality was far more complex. He was admired for his intelligence and charm, but those who appeared on stage with him sometimes discovered a side of Alex that was not quite as warm as his on-screen image suggested. In fact, there were contestants who walked away believing that Trebek simply did not like them. And in some cases, the way he treated them during the game made that feeling undeniable. Alex Trebek was born to host a show like Jeopardy, a program that demanded precision, discipline, and respect for knowledge. When he took over in 1984, he brought with him a style that was very different from the kind of game show energy audiences were used to. Unlike other hosts who leaned heavily into theatrics or exaggerated excitement, Trebek carried himself with dignity. He spoke carefully, moved deliberately, and rarely broke character. That seriousness became part of his charm. Trebek's humor, when it surfaced, was dry and often laced with sarcasm. Fans loved it when he delivered a quick remark after a contestant gave a strange answer, or when he allowed a hint of playful disbelief to cross his face. Fans described him as blisteringly intelligent, with some others calling him one of the greatest villains pop culture has ever known. It was an unusual way to describe a game show host, but it captured the duality of Trebek perfectly. He was witty and engaging, but there was always an edge to his personality, a sharpness that kept contestants on their toes. For many viewers, that sharpness was part of what made him great. Yet for contestants standing on stage, it could feel intimidating. Trebek's bluntness often bordered on rudeness, and while some found it refreshing, others left the show wondering if they had crossed a line without realizing it. His standards were high, and if a contestant gave an answer that was poorly phrased or revealed a lack of understanding, Trebek didn't hesitate to make it clear. He was never cruel outright, but he could be dismissive, and in the high-pressure environment of Jeopardy, that small shift in tone could be enough to sting. Adding to this perception was the fact that contestants were not allowed to interact with him before the cameras rolled. A 2016 contestant said in an interview that there was a strict no-contact rule, explaining that they were not allowed to meet Alex Trebek before the game began to avoid any kind of bias. While the rule made sense from a fairness perspective, many participants found it cold. On television, Trebek looked like a host who built instant rapport with the people standing at the podiums. In reality, that rapport began only after the cameras were rolling, and it could disappear just as quickly if he wasn't impressed. Trebek also developed a reputation for resisting change when it came to the game itself. He was protective of Jeopardy's format, believing the show's success depended on its consistency. When IBM introduced its Watson computer to compete against past champions, producers had to adjust the format to include on-screen displays of Watson's confidence levels and other features. Trebek had to adapt on the fly, and while he went along with the changes, those who worked closely with him noticed his frustration. He wasn't interested in gimmicks or spectacle. Instead, he wanted the focus to remain on the game. His stubbornness protected Jeopardy's integrity, but it also revealed how resistant he could be when pushed outside his comfort zone. When Trebek passed away in 2020, Jeopardy, faced one of the most turbulent periods in its history. The search for a new host exposed just how irreplaceable he had been.
Mike Richards, who stepped down from the role this morning after being named Alex Trebek's replacement.
Mike Richards was briefly appointed but resigned after past controversies surfaced, leaving the show scrambling. Mayim Bialik and former champion Ken Jennings shared the role, but even that arrangement sparked debate. Bialik eventually stepped away, while Jennings became the permanent host. Reflecting on the chaos, Jennings remarked that Trebek wouldn't have wanted all this drama, proving how Trebek's steady presence had held the show together for decades. But even with all the praise and respect that poured in after his passing, there remained another side to Alex Trebek's story. The contestants who stepped onto the stage with high hopes sometimes walked away with disappointment, not because they lost, but because they felt the host himself hadn't been in their corner. He could be charming one moment and icy the next. For some, he was supportive. For others, he was dismissive. And for a few, the experience was unforgettable in all the wrong ways. And among the thousands of contestants who stood across from him, there are 7 in particular who stand out. Their stories have become part of the show's lore, remembered not only for the questions asked and the answers given, but also for the subtle ways Alex Trebek let the world know when someone on that stage was not among his favorites. Which contestants could possibly earn that reaction from a host who seemed so unshakable on screen? And what exactly did they do to leave Trebek so visibly unimpressed? Susan Cole? When Susan Cole stepped onto the Jeopardy stage in 2016, she looked like the perfect example of what the show had always celebrated: intelligence, poise, and a quirky enthusiasm for culture that went beyond the ordinary. A librarian from Maryland, Cole wasn't the kind of contestant who faded into the background. She had personality, and during the usual contestant interview segment, she revealed something that was both unexpected and deeply personal: her love for nerdcore hip-hop. For those unfamiliar, nerdcore is a subgenre of rap centered around themes like science fiction, fantasy, video games, and all things considered geeky. Cole described it as music made by and for people who embrace their inner nerds, people who are unapologetic about their interests and passions. It was supposed to be a lighthearted, fun moment, the kind of story that makes contestants memorable. But Trebek's reaction instantly changed the tone of the conversation. Without skipping a beat, Alex Trebek responded with a smirk and the words, "losers," in other words. The audience laughed, and even Cole gave an awkward smile, but the moment landed heavily. It was classic Trebek, blunt, dry, and quick with a joke, but to many viewers it crossed a line. In that instant, the warmth of her story was undercut by the sting of his sarcasm, and the internet noticed. Clips of the exchange spread quickly online, sparking debates about whether Trebek's comment was a harmless quip or an unnecessarily cruel jab. The backlash was immediate. Social media lit up with memes and posts criticizing Trebek for being dismissive. Fans pointed out that Cole had simply shared something she loved, only to be mocked on national television by the very host who was supposed to be championing curiosity. The moment grew so viral that it spilled outside the usual circles of Jeopardy fandom. Soon, people who had never even watched the show were weighing in on the exchange. It didn't stop there. The hip-hop community itself responded, with some artists rallying around Cole in solidarity. A diss track titled "Who is Alex Trebek?" appeared online, directly addressing the comment and flipping the insult back at the host. The track went viral in its own right, adding fuel to the conversation and cementing the moment as one of the most infamous contestant interactions in the show's history. Through it all, Susan Cole handled the situation with composure. While Trebek's remark may have left a sting, she let her gameplay do the talking. Across 3 games, she amassed a total of $67,800 in winnings, an impressive run by any measure. For many fans, her victory felt like a quiet act of vindication. No sarcastic remark could diminish the fact that she had succeeded where countless others had faltered. But Susan Cole was far from the only contestant who walked away with a story like this. Over the decades, there were several moments where Trebek's comments left viewers divided. And this next contestant is someone whose interaction with Trebek may not have gone viral in the same way, but still revealed the sharper edge of his personality. Lindseay Annit. When Lindseay Annit appeared on Jeopardy. In 2010, she was introduced as a journalism student with big dreams. Like so many contestants before her, she used her on-air interview time to share a personal detail that helped explain who she was and what drove her. For Annit, that inspiration came from the 2000 film Almost Famous, a story about a young journalist who embeds with a rock band while trying to break into the world of music reporting. It was a unique answer that highlighted her passion and ambition, but the way Alex Trebek responded changed the tone completely. Instead of praising her enthusiasm or simply moving on, Trebek looked at her and asked, "So you want to be a groupie, in other words?" The reaction was instant. Laughter rippled across the audience, but for many viewers at home, the remark didn't land as a harmless joke. It was dismissive, even insulting, and it undermined the seriousness of Annit's career goals in a single line. Fans quickly took to message boards and blogs, calling out Trebek for what they saw as an inappropriate quip. By equating her ambition to little more than following musicians around, Trebek turned a professional aspiration into a punchline. The backlash grew louder as the clip spread online. Viewers pointed out that Annit had been trying to share a personal story about journalism, only for Trebek to reduce it to a stereotype. The criticism wasn't confined to social media either, because the Elle magazine published a piece bluntly titled, "Alex Trebek Hates Women," highlighting the exchange as an example of how female contestants were sometimes treated on the show. While the headline was provocative, it captured the frustration many fans felt, that Trebek's humor sometimes came at the expense of respect. Lindseay Annit may not have had the most memorable performance in terms of winnings, but her exchange with Trebek was remembered long after the episode aired. It joined the list of interactions where Trebek's sharp tongue drew criticism, adding to the complicated picture of his personality behind the podium. And while Annit's story stands out for the reaction it provoked, it wasn't unique. Over the decades, countless contestants found themselves on the receiving end of remarks that felt more cutting than clever. This next example takes us to a contestant whose struggles weren't about an offhand comment during an interview, but about how Trebek reacted when a particular category exposed his weaknesses. Ryan Fster. Ryan Fster came to Jeopardy! In 2018 with the same dream as every contestant before him, to test his knowledge on the biggest trivia stage in the world. A young man from Washington State, Fster was sharp, confident, and quick on the buzzer. But like so many players, he had a weak spot. And on that night, it came in the form of sports trivia, specifically football. The category seemed straightforward enough, but as the clues unfolded, something unexpected happened. One by one, the football questions were read aloud, and not a single contestant buzzed in with a correct response. The silence was deafening, and for Alex Trebek, it was too good an opportunity to let slide. Looking at the three contestants, he leaned forward and delivered a line that instantly became part of Jeopardy. "Lore, if you guys ring in and get this one, I will die." It was classic Trebek, dry, sarcastic, and tinged with disbelief. The audience erupted in laughter, and even the contestants cracked smiles despite their embarrassment. But as funny as the moment was to many fans, there were those who felt it went a little too far. After all, Trebek wasn't just pointing out a missed question, he was underlining the fact that the player's knowledge gap was painfully obvious. For Ryan Fster, the remark didn't end his run. He actually went on to win multiple games and earn more than $90,000 during his time on the show. Still, that one moment stuck with him and with the audience. It became one of those clips that resurfaced again and again online, a reminder of how Trebek's quick tongue could turn even an awkward silence into television gold. What makes the incident so memorable is that it captures the double-edged nature of Trebek's hosting style. On one hand, he was hilarious. His sarcasm added energy to the show and reminded viewers that trivia, while serious, could also be fun. On the other hand, his words could make contestants feel small, especially when their weaknesses were laid bare on national television. Fster himself seemed to take it in stride, but fans debated whether the comment crossed into mockery. Either way, it added to the list of moments where Trebek's personality shone through the polished format of the game. Fans didn't tune in to Jeopardy! Expecting gentle encouragement, they tuned in to see a host who treated knowledge seriously and wasn't afraid to let contestants know when they'd come up short. And as memorable as Fster's experience was, it pales in comparison to the firestorm surrounding another contestant, one whose aggressive playing style not only changed how the game was viewed, but also put him at odds with Trebek himself. Arthur Chu. Arthur Chu didn't step onto the Jeopardy stage in 2014 hoping to be controversial, but controversy followed him anyway. A former voice actor and insurance analyst, Chu approached the game with a kind of intensity that caught everyone off guard. Instead of sticking to the traditional way of working through categories in neat order, he bounced around the board, hunting for daily doubles and disrupting the rhythm of the game. To him, it was a simple strategy: maximize your chances of winning. However, to the audience, it looked chaotic. Trebek, ever the steady hand at the podium, did his best to keep things moving, but his discomfort showed. He remained professional, but viewers noticed the subtle changes in his tone.
It took a little while for Arthur to get the audiences to warm up to him.
The tightness in his smile, and the way he seemed less amused as Chu carved up the board. Trebek valued order and consistency, and here was a contestant turning the game into something unpredictable. For a host who saw himself as the guardian of Jeopardy's traditions, Chu's tactics were a disruption. The reaction outside the studio was even more dramatic. Almost overnight, Arthur Chu was branded the most hated contestant in Jeopardy history. Social media erupted with criticism. Some fans accused him of disrespecting the game, while others went as far as sending him hostile messages. At the same time, a different group of viewers rallied behind him, praising his ingenuity and his refusal to conform to expectations. Love him or hate him, people couldn't stop talking about him. Trebek, for his part, never outright condemned Chu's strategy. He didn't need to because his body language said enough. Where he usually engaged with contestants warmly, his interactions with Chu felt cooler and more measured. It wasn't personal, but it was clear that this was not the style of play Trebek preferred. Still, he couldn't deny the results. Chu went on an impressive run, winning 11 games and more than $297,000. His approach worked, even if it ruffled feathers along the way. What Chu accomplished left a lasting mark on the game. His aggressive style, once criticized, became a model for future players. Contestants like James Holzhauer later used similar strategies to historic success, and suddenly, what was once considered disruptive became part of the playbook. In that sense, Chu forced Jeopardy to evolve, whether Trebek liked it or not. And while Chu became infamous for changing how Jeopardy was played, he wasn't the only contestant who left a strong impression on Trebek and the audience. Another player's charm, confidence, and unshakable composure gave him the nickname Mr. Personality, and Trebek's reactions to him couldn't have been more different. Buzzy Cohen. When Buzzy Cohen first appeared on Jeopardy! In 2016, audiences knew right away he was not going to be a typical contestant. A music executive from Los Angeles, Cohen carried himself with a level of confidence and flair that bordered on theatrical. From his stylish suits to his cheeky smile, he treated the game as both a competition and a performance. And perhaps nothing embodied that more than his habit of writing witty, sometimes irreverent responses in Final Jeopardy! One of his most famous moments came when, comfortably ahead in a game, he scribbled down a wrong answer that wasn't really an answer at all. "Who is? You aren't rid of me yet, Trebek." The audience laughed, and Buzzy leaned into the role of class clown. It was the kind of move that thrilled some fans, but also tested the patience of a host who valued decorum. Alex Trebek's reaction to Buzzy was telling. Sometimes he chuckled along, indulging the humor with a smirk or a quick comeback. Other times he remained stone-faced, making it clear that he didn't always appreciate the contestants' antics. Trebek's personality was rooted in sharp wit and high standards, and while he could laugh at a good joke, he disliked anything that seemed to undermine the seriousness of the game. With Buzzy, that line was crossed more than once. Viewers were just as divided. Many loved Cohen's confidence and swagger, seeing him as a breath of fresh air on a show often associated with buttoned-up seriousness. His playful personality even earned him the nickname Mr. Personality, but just as many found him insufferable, accusing him of arrogance and disrespect. Internet forums filled with debates about whether Cohen was the most entertaining contestant in years or the most obnoxious.
When he started winning on the program, he would, touch something different each day.
Regardless of where people stood, Cohen couldn't be ignored. He went on a 9-game winning streak, collecting nearly $165,000 and cementing his place in Jeopardy history. But his legacy didn't end there. In 2017, he returned for the Tournament of Champions and won it all, silencing critics who claimed his antics masked a lack of skill. Later, following Alex Trebek's passing, Cohen was invited back not as a contestant but as a guest host for the Tournament of Champions, a rare honor that showed how deeply his presence had imprinted itself on the show. For Trebek, Cohen was a mixed bag. He represented both the joy and the frustration of dealing with contestants who dared to play outside the lines. Yet Trebek's willingness to roll with Cohen's humor, even if reluctantly, revealed something essential about him. He understood that Jeopardy was more than just a game of trivia. It was also about personality, about moments that fans would remember long after the questions themselves were forgotten. But if Buzzy Cohen brought flamboyance and charm to the stage, the next contestant brought something else entirely: fire, criticism, and controversy. And unlike Cohen, whose playfulness was divisive but lighthearted, this player challenged Jeopardy itself, and in doing so, stirred a storm Alex Trebek could not easily brush aside. Yogesh Rout. When Yogesh Rout walked onto the Jeopardy stage, he was already well known in trivia circles. A decorated quiz champion with a commanding presence online, he wasn't just another contestant hoping for a shot at fame. Rout was someone who had built his reputation on intellectual dominance, and with that came a sense of confidence, or, depending on who you asked, arrogance. One of the most talked about moments from his run was subtle but telling. Rout reportedly refused to clap for a fellow contestant's win. On a show that prided itself on sportsmanship and mutual respect, the gesture, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. Fans immediately seized on it, calling it poor form and unworthy of the game's traditions. But the real firestorm came after his appearance, when Rout didn't just critique Jeopardy, he dismantled it online. In long posts, he dismissed the show as a glorified reality show, suggesting that its cultural reputation far outweighed its actual merit as a competition of knowledge. For die-hard fans, it was blasphemy. Alex Trebek had spent nearly 4 decades elevating Jeopardy into a respected institution, and here was a champion calling it out as entertainment fluff. Though Trebek had already passed away by the time of Rout's criticisms, fans couldn't help but speculate on how the legendary host might have responded. Many imagined that Trebek, never one to tolerate arrogance, would have roasted Rout on air with a perfectly timed barb or an icy smile. The idea that Trebek could have given him a befitting roast became part of the debate itself, a reminder of how much of the show's soul was tied to the man behind the podium. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Viewers flooded online forums, some demanding Rout be banned from returning to the show in any form. Even other champions weighed in. James Holzhauer, one of Jeopardy's most celebrated players, mocked Rout's behavior with his trademark wit, further cementing the sense that Rout had crossed a line that few contestants dared to. And yet, his legacy is more complicated than outright villainy. For some, Rout raised uncomfortable but valid questions about the way Jeopardy presents itself as both a serious intellectual contest and ultimately a piece of television entertainment. His refusal to treat it as sacred left a mark, sparking debates about elitism, sportsmanship, and what contestants owe the game's legacy. Still, for most fans, Yogesh Rout will always be remembered less for his trivia skills and more for his attitude. But if Rout stirred controversy with his critiques and defiance, this next contestant brought a different kind of drama from a single shocking answer on live television. One slip of the tongue, one unexpected word, and Alex Trebek's reaction said it all. The risque answer. Some moments in Jeopardy history are remembered not for brilliance, but for pure shock value. One of the most infamous examples came from a contestant whose name quickly faded into obscurity, but whose answer lives on in viral clips across the internet. It wasn't a high-stakes wager or a jaw-dropping run of correct responses that made this player unforgettable. It was a slip of the tongue that left Alex Trebek, the studio audience, and millions of viewers in stunned laughter. The clue itself was straightforward. The correct response should have been a love triangle, a classic phrase, safe and expected. But under the pressure of the lights, cameras, and Trebek's watchful gaze, the contestant blurted out something far more risque and inappropriate. It wasn't malicious and it wasn't intentional, but in an instant, the wholesome tone of Jeopardy cracked wide open. Trebek's response was what made the moment legendary. Without missing a beat, he turned the awkward slip into comedy. "Kara has obviously had much more experience than I," he quipped, in that perfectly dry, sarcastic style that only he could deliver. The audience erupted into laughter, the tension dissolved, and Trebek once again showed why he was a master at controlling the energy of the room. The clip quickly circulated beyond the show, shared endlessly online as one of the rare times Jeopardy strayed into unexpected adult humor. Fans who had grown up with the show's buttoned-up reputation couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some replayed it for the contestants' embarrassment, others for Trebek's razor-sharp wit. But almost everyone agreed. It was one of the funniest, unscripted moments in the show's long history. What makes the incident so shocking isn't just the slip itself, because game shows are full of funny wrong answers, but the way Trebek handled it. His ability to laugh with, rather than at, contestants, while still sneaking in a playful jab, cemented the moment as harmless fun instead of scandal. For the contestant, it was undoubtedly a red-faced memory, but for Jeopardy! As a whole, it became an iconic reminder that the game was live, unpredictable, and very human. It showed that even the smartest contestants, under the pressure of the game, could stumble into unforgettable mistakes. And in the end, it also highlighted Trebek's brilliance as a host. He didn't need to force humor, he simply let the moment breathe, added a single cutting line, and turned an embarrassing blunder into a piece of Jeopardy legend. It was proof that not every memorable contestant moment came from rivalry, arrogance, or brilliance. Sometimes all it took was a slip of the tongue, and Alex Trebek's perfect timing to create a clip that fans would be laughing about decades later. Which name on this list shocked you the most? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you love juicy deep dives into celebrity lives, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new video.